Jay, first of all, I think for you, you write really well. So your writing talent is not in question here. What you've got to learn to do, and I guess the battle for you, and the question you've got to ask yourself here is: Are you willing to play the VCE game, the VCE English game that's going to get you, the SAC scores that you need or want, and maybe the score on the end of year exam that you're after? Because the problem with you is you get sucked in a little bit with your judgment call, and despite some really impressive writing, and it's very clear that you're using those transition words, which improves your writing even more. You lose it a little bit. You lose the reader a little bit, and you've got to remember at the end of the year, if someone who read this and didn't know you, they'll be immediately put off by references of calling Kinsella a hippie. It's just not advisable. They would be a little bit put off by calling Kinsella an extremist type attachment to the land, despite, part of me agreeing with you. They would be put off by saying that Kinsella is a glass half empty type person. Parts of your response here seem to be not so subtle attacks on the character of John Kinsella, and this is not the task, and that's my main feedback for you is you're a very, very talented writer. In fact, your use of language and your ability to mould language and to make a point is up there with some of the best writers in this class. And I wish sometimes that that I could say to those, the reason why those people are probably getting sack marks a little bit better than you is because they're playing the game a little bit more. And it's, it's hard because here I am trying to say, well, I can see your natural want to combat Kinsella is obviously not, there seems to be an insistence on your half to pot Kinsella a little bit, and I get that, but if I'm not doing my job properly if I don't recommend you stifle that for the sake of marks, and that it's a challenge there. Look, other feedback for you is you've got to remember what the prompt was. So the prompt was the way we encounter a landscape is through our treatment of it. The first paragraph that you wrote was really, really good. It talked about Kinsella's use of seasons, and he doesn't just talk about warm weather, he talks about baking, scorching hot, and I'm thinking to myself, excellent, like, this is great here, and the paragraph's going on, and you talked about he discovers a sheep that's blood black beneath the skin, and I'm thinking, excellent, he's going to talk about how, surely he's going to tell me about something here where Kinsella seems to, encounter the landscape, or seems to be suggesting that we encounter hot landscapes, and they equate to tragic deaths or deaths that are brutal deaths under the hot Australian sun, and so therefore our treatment of those places is often brutal, and because of the hot season. And I'm thinking that you're going to make a point here that relates to the prompt. And instead, at the end of that, you go off tangent and you begin to talk about Kinsella as a glass half empty type of character. So again, you've got to bear the prompt in mind. At the end of each paragraph, address it in some way. What's your point here that you're trying to make in response to the prompt? Because I felt like some of your paragraphs started off so well, but then they moved away from the prompt, and it ended up with you kind of having a little pot at Kinsella. So that's something that you need to consider. Just remember too that it's not an essay on Kinsella. It can be largely, you can use Kinsella often, but you've got to have something to say yourself about that prompt, And in this one here, it was basically an examination of Kinsella's poetry, and it was more of a text response with a little bit of opinion thrown in. Try and bring in something else. So you remember this whole task is to use ideas from Kinsella's poetry to support something that you have to say about the prompt as well. So if you write this type of response, you're going to get marked down because it's more text responsey rather than, Jay Webb having his own point of view in response to the prompt and using Kinsella to either bolster that or showing that Kinsella well enough that he seems to disagree with your point of view or something like that. So, it's not an essay on Kinsella just by himself, something that you need to remember.